Sometime in the last, hour and a half, 5, as they were described, Iranian Americans have been freed from Iran and are now back on American soil. We get Shannon Crawford from ABC News in to fill in the blanks here. What do we not know? What do we know?
Well, basically, we know we were able to see these Americans reunite with their family members. Some of them have been detained for years. They were able to reunite in the Washington, D.C. area. These were, of course, as you imagine, emotional reunions. The president has said he's been working to bring a resolution to these 5 cases, virtually in some instances since he entered office. But that resolution to the case is also bringing up new questions this morning about what the U.S. had to concede to Iran in order to win their freedom and whether it's going to strengthen a really authoritarian, brutal regime.
Okay, so the money, the billions of Iranian assets that have been freed up are being held what amounts to escrow by Qatar, and then they are to be released to Iran only if Iran spends them on humanitarian efforts. How do we make sure that's the case?
Well, we're still awaiting details from the Treasury Department on exactly how they're going to conduct that oversight. They say, as you point out, it's going to be a really restricted account in Qatar. What they're going to do is insist that Iran spend the money on humanitarian things like medicine, food, agriculture, and they're only going to reimburse Tehran if they're able to prove that they spent the money legitimately, they used a vetted non-Iranian source to buy the product. But there are plenty of critics that say that even if Iran does play by the rules here, what this is effectively going to do is free up assets from other places in the regime that they can use potentially for nefarious means like supporting terrorists or, furthering their nuclear and missile programs, which have made real progress in recent years.
Has anybody addressed to you or answered questions by you in regards to the trust factor of the Qatar government? I mean, this is the government that clearly, and this seems to be fully vetted in stories, stole the World Cup, bribed their way into the World Cup. This is not exactly a regime that everybody goes, oh, yeah, those are the Abe Lincoln folks. So was anybody talking about that?
It is a good question, a critical question. Officials here are open. They say that there are things that Qataris do that they're, not directly aligned with. Of course, there's the evidence you mentioned, and there's also human rights abuses that the administration would really like to see addressed within the country. But when it comes to dealing with some of these, let's just say adversarial countries like Iran and even the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, Qatar has been, the U.S. officials say, a pivotal partner. They've been trustworthy. But, there's only so much that anyone really can do here. Iran has a long history of avoiding sanctions and, getting around things. They say that this channel is designed to prevent money laundering, but you imagine that's something that only time will be able to tell.
So, Shannon, I want to ask about the 5 Americans that were released. We know the names of 3 of them, still don't know 2. And then are they being, because they're obviously going to have a lot of emotional and mental and health concerns coming back here. Are they getting seen by doctors in D.C.?
It's a great question. So, yes, 2 don't want to be identified, but the other 3 were familiar with those cases. We've been tracking them for years. So they're all back now, and now they landed on an air base nearby the Washington, D.C. area, and where Department of Defense officials were on hand to provide services to, be it medical, be it emotional, as you point out, psychological services, and really to help them acclimate to, life in the free world. So, they do have all the resources of the U.S. military available to them. But yes, it still could be, a long time before they feel themselves again.
Is anyone buying into this notion that, I guess according to an AP story this morning, that Iran's president thinks that this whole deal is going to help build trust with the U.S.? Does anybody buy that?
From the U.S. side, absolutely not. Every official I've spoken to has been clear to say that this deal does not alter the overall relationship between the U.S. and Iran. Now, we are going to see at the UN General Assembly later today, President Biden and Iran's President Raisi will be speaking. They might have different narratives on how they spin this, but U.S. officials have said there is no way that they're going to have any, upcoming meetings this week with Iran. They don't see any room for progress right now on other fronts. And really, bottom line, they do not trust Iran. They're saying that, for U.S. citizens, under no circumstances should they travel to the country. There's still a very serious risk for detention because Iran wants to use Americans as political bargaining chips. They make, they're very direct and clear about that.
Talking to Shannon Crawford, ABC News. We'll let you go on this. These 5 folks, what were they being held for? What did they allegedly do? Was it the traditional, they were spies?
That's exactly right. They're espionage charges. For the 3 cases that we are familiar with, they were charged with spying for the U.S. Of course, those are charges that the freed prisoners and the U.S. denies, but nonetheless, they were sentenced to 10 years, and they served various lengths of those sentences, of course, but they were held for extended periods of time in Iran's notorious Evin prison. So it was a hard penalty to pay for a crime that they say they didn't commit, and the U.S. government says they did not commit.
I saw a quote last night from one of them said that unspeakable atrocities were endured by himself and others. And who do we give up?
For us, it was 5 Iranians that were, the U.S. says they were non-violent offenses. 3 of them were actually just charged with offenses. They've not gone to trial yet. 2 were already serving sentences. 1 had just a couple months left, and that was mainly for offenses related to supporting the Iranian regime illegally.
Outside of sanctions. So no known terrorists were given up, I guess is the point, right?
That's correct.
Shannon, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Shannon Crawford at ABC News State Department correspondent. Struck by 2 things there. The obvious concern that Qatar is shady as hell. And the thing that doesn't get talked about is when you find a third party between a terrorist state and us, there's no guarantee that the third party is going to go with us. Mm-mm. They're in the middle because they're willing to be in the middle,
right,
which means they're willing to cut the deal that's best for them.
Right. Of course.
So if Iran makes it better for Qatar to go, yeah, give us our money. Now, if there's some lever in there where, there's somebody in D.C. that's got a passbook and they have to sign off on every transaction and there has to be some sort of proving up of the thing, I suppose I don't know. I just have great doubts about this. I'm glad the people are free. My
Absolutely.
God, what they must have gone through.
I can't imagine.
But, the fair question is, and it's not a Republican question, this ought to be an American question. The fair question is, what did we give up,
sure,
and what sort of danger have we put ourselves in? And if we set a precedent going forward that somebody else can hold us up for ransom? These kidnapping things, man. It's going on more and more.
Yeah.
614. I'm still trying to get on the Vladimir Putin hates me list to get banned from Moscow. He won't even call me.
I think you're close.